Verily at the first chaos came to be, but next wide-bosomed earth, the ever-sure foundations of all the deathless ones who hold the peaks of snowy Olympus, and dim Tartarus in the depth of the wide-pathed earth, and Eros, love, fairest among the deathless gods, who unnerves the limbs and overcomes the mind and wise counsels of all gods and all men within them. Welcome to Mythworld. I'm William Skye, coming to you from the vast nothingness at the start of this story, where we'll be looking at the Greek primordial gods. This is the first generation of gods in Greek mythology. They came way before all of the others, but they are the ancestors of the likes of Zeus and Athena and the other more familiar gods, and we'll see how they all connect up. These primordials are less involved in the heroic myths and stories that we're used to, but you will recognise a few names because their names are now common words in the English language. The quote I read at the start is from Hesiod's Theogony, more specifically the translation by Hugh G. Evelyn White. This poem, translated into prose form, is widely considered the best source on the relationship between all of the Greek divinities, but it is by no means the only one. So we'll start off with the standard version of events according to Hesiod, but later we'll look at a different account from Orphism, which includes a cosmic egg and a three-headed dragon, so stick around for that. But for now, let's start at the beginning according to Hesiod. The beginning of the beginning, where nothing exists. First, chaos came to be, chaos being some kind of primordial soup of unformed elements. Then we have three other entities coming into being out of nothing. We get wide-bosomed Earth, who is known as Gaia to the Greeks and Terra to the Romans, and Tartarus, the underworld dwelling beneath Gaia, and Eros, the god of procreation and love. So out of nowhere these four primordials appear. There's no real word on how, just that they spring up, and chaos was the first one. Kind of. Time is a bit weird because the time god Cronus hasn't been born yet, so there is no time at this point. Anyway, these four primordials then have offspring, most of the time on their own, asexually, but sometimes with each other. These offspring are also considered primordials, and there's quite a lot of them. So we're going to look at the four originals and their children each in turn, starting with Chaos. Like many of the primordial gods, Chaos is both a place and a personification. Chaos exists beneath the earth, but above Tartarus, the underworld. Chaos is the void. It's an unformed mass of elements that haven't come together in any particular shape. So it seems like a place or a state of matter where things haven't been created yet, like outer space before planets formed, or the oceans before life begins to evolve. But it's also personified enough to have children. Nobody knows exactly how this happens, but Chaos does it on its own. It doesn't need a mate. And the results are Erebus, darkness, and Nyx, night. And then we're going to get into our first bit of weird intrafamiliar procreation, as Erebus and Nyx join together to have two children who are called Hemera, day, and Ether, bright light. So yeah, Erebus and Nyx are kind of like brother and sister. Erebus is male, Nyx is female, and they're both the children of Chaos. You're going to have to get used to the idea of brother and sister, mother and son, father and daughter having children together. It's going to come up a lot in Greek mythology. And at this point in the primordials, it's slightly less iffy because these gods, these forces, are less anthropomorphic. They seem less human to us. Plus, there aren't that many of them and they've got to mate with someone, right? Well, not necessarily actually, because Nyx managed to pop out a load of kids on her own without needing Erebus. She has well over a dozen daughters, including the Fates, and a bunch of other kind of emotional personifications, often negative, like death and blame and fear and that kind of thing. So the primordials we've seen so far coming from Chaos are Nyx and Erebus, and then Hemera and Ether. Now let's hop on over to Eros, the primordial god of love and procreation, who you would expect to have loads of kids. I mean, the word erotic comes from his name. A quick aside for the record, some accounts have Eros as the child of Ares and Aphrodite, way down the family tree. But in Hesiod's Theogony, Eros is there right from the beginning. He's a primordial. So if we consider him right from the start, his family tree is going to be massive, right? So let's zoom out and... Oh, wait, what? No kids? From the god of procreation? Well, there are a few different theories on why this is. Some consider Eros as a patron of homosexuality, but he could still have kids like Chaos and Nyx did, just pop them out. He doesn't necessarily need a female partner. Others would say that Eros's role was encouraging procreation in others, rather than doing it himself. The Roman version of Eros is Cupid, and Cupid is very famous for his arrow that he shoots at people and makes them fall in love. And actually, it's worth pointing out that in the accounts where Eros is the son of Aphrodite and Ares, then Eros does have a child with Psyche, who he falls in love with. That child was a daughter called Hedone, and that's where we get the word hedonism from. So Eros doesn't have a big family tree with loads of descendants. But now we're going to move over to Gaia, who really does, and things are going to get messy here. Gaia is the ancestor of almost all of the gods, with the only exceptions being the ones we looked at earlier with Chaos. And like Chaos, Gaia just popped out 3 kids on her own. These were Aurea, Pontus, and Uranos. Aurea is a bit of a weird one. Sometimes called the Aurea, it might be a plural child, and it's the mountains and hills of the world. Aurea didn't have any children, the line ends there, and it never really appears in any of the myths. It's kind of just off to the side, it's there, but nobody really cares about it. Pontus is the original sea god, who will have loads of really interesting and cool water-based descendants. They include Medusa, Achilles, and Pegasus. But the main one of Gaia's children is Uranos, who covers Gaia on every side. And Gaia and Uranos have loads of kids together. And again, a bit of a cringe at the intrafamiliar relations there, because Gaia birthed Uranos, so is his mother, and then they had children together. The children Gaia and Uranos had together include the Cyclops, the Hecatoncheires, or the 100-handed giants, and the Titans. 12 Titans in all, some of which are much more notable than others, and we'll look at all of them in another video. They include Oceanus and Hyperion and Theia, as well as Cronus and Rhea, who mated together to have 6 very important gods that you might have heard of, including Hera, Demeter, Hestia, Hades, Poseidon, and a little guy called Zeus. That means Uranos is Zeus's grandfather, and Gaia is Zeus's grandmother. Gaia is also Zeus's great-grandmother, technically, because she's the mother of his grandfather. It's a bit weird. And we're getting ahead of ourselves, because the Titans and Zeus's generation are not the Primordials. So let's get back to them. So Gaia and Uranos have all of these kids. But they have a bit of a falling out because Uranos doesn't like his kids and hides them deep within Gaia. It's another story for another time, but essentially Gaia and Uranos split up for a time, and Gaia goes and has loads of kids with her other son, Pontus. And as I said before, Pontus gives rise to loads of cool and interesting gods related to water and the sea. And a lot of those children interbreed with the ones from Gaia and Uranos. So there's a big mixture of cousins and step-siblings and half-siblings, and it's very, very messy. Oh, and just in case you forgot about Tartarus, he got in on the Gaia action too. Tartarus is the underworld, generally considered to be male, and he exists beneath Gaia. Some people say that Tartarus and Hades are the same thing. Others say that Tartarus is even further below Hades, like a deeper, darker underworld. So later on in the events of the gods and things, Gaia and Tartarus had one child called Typhon or Typhoeus. And this was a big-ass scary monster that at one point went after Zeus and nearly overthrew him. So in all, our primordials are Chaos, Eros, Gaia, Tartarus, then Erebus and Nyx, who had Hemera and Ether, and then we have the Aurea, Pontus, and Uranos. Did you notice earlier how I called Pontus the sea god? You might be thinking, isn't that Poseidon, you know, the guy with the big trident and the scraggly beard? And what about Uranos, the god of the heavens and the sky? Wasn't that Zeus? Well, you're kind of correct, because there's a difference between the primordials and the later gods. Pontus is the sea. Uranos is the heaven. These forces are deeply entwined and interlinked with the actual place, the actual thing that they represent. In fact, some people consider them not to be gods at all, just forces and places. Poseidon is not the sea, but he rules the sea, And in the same way, Zeus is not the heavens, but he rules the heavens, and everything else for that matter. And that reflects the transition from the Primordials, who are not very human, they're more like physical entities, towards the later gods like Zeus and Athena, who are essentially humans with supernatural powers. Oh, and as I mentioned earlier, it is a bit weird because Cronus, the god of time, who is the son of Gaia and Uranus and the father of Zeus, he didn't exist right at the start, so everything before him is in a time without time. So when he does turn up, everything has a bit more of a sequential, logical order. However, in some accounts, the creation myth is wildly different to what I've just told you from Hesiod's theogony. So now we're going to leave Hesiod there. We know it's the standard, it's mostly accepted, and let's look at another account from Orphism. Orphism is a variant belief system, still rooted in Greek mythology, but based on the poetry of Orpheus, the bard, who himself is a mythical figure. In reality, the Orphic accounts are from a load of different poems and authors from different times, and they're all kind of jumbled together to create Orphism. And there's no one Orphism, there's different branches of it, all telling slightly different stories. Some say that water is the first primordial entity, and others say it's Kronos, the time god. Note that this isn't the same Kronos who was the Titan son of Gaia and Uranus, but a different god entirely, although they are often mingled together, and it's very confusing. Anyway, in my favourite version from Orphism, Kronos is the first entity, and he is a triformed dragon with 3 different heads. One is a lion, one is a bull, and one is a human. That's a pretty wild creature. And this Kronos creates a cosmic egg. A cosmic egg is quite a common theme across mythologies around the world. It may have been how Greek mythology started and then changed later, or it could have been introduced into Greek mythology from another culture. In any case, this big old cosmic egg hatches to produce Phanes, also known as Protogonos. Phanes is a hermaphroditic being that is able to reproduce with itself to create all of the original primordials like Gaia and Tartarus. And then things more or less go as they were in Hesiod's theogony, with Gaia and Uranus having the Titan children, etc. Again, I'll reiterate that there are lots of different versions of the Greek creation myth, so what I've told here might not match with what you read or hear in other places. Every book I read has at least some differences from all of the others. That's what you get from thousands of years of retelling. Almost all of them converge on one particular myth, which is the succession myth. That's the one with genitals being cut off and gods eating their babies. So make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you don't miss out on my video on all of that craziness. See you next time.